Last week, we had some exciting action, great setup, the plot is in full force. Brad is just killing it in the first half of this book. Well, I gotta say, the second half of this book keeps it going, yet adds some friendly faces that really, really bring it up a notch.
Yeah, so right after he gets Gary, right, he goes to the hospital, and these two... one of the nurses says you have two visitors, and immediately your mind just goes to the Russians, like they're there.
Exactly.
And then he knocks on the door, and someone says, like in bad German, like housekeeping or something. Yeah,
we already ate.
It's Gordo Avigliano and our now friendly Rick Morrell.
Yes, who, and I love this detail. Morrell gave himself his own code name, Bench Press. Who picks their own tag name, you know? Like, he just made up Bench Press. You're supposed to hate this guy, but now we kind of like him.
You kind of like him, but you also don't like him. You
exactly.
know? There's even that one scene where he's, later on, where he's like, they meet up with Leighton, and, like, Leighton wants to establish bona fides, right? And Morell's just a complete asshole to him. And you're like, come on, you got to know, yes, you're pressed for time, but you got to realize that this guy's his mission parameters are to literally bring a nuke into Russian territory. And doesn't know you from Adam, you know? Like, right. You need to establish something.
You got to give him something. You got to throw him a bone.
You got the burst transmitter. You got here. You figured out who I was. But, you know, this is a game of spies.
Exactly.
Yeah, you wanna like Rick, but you also want to hate him. And, yeah, only losers give themselves, you know, their own call sign, especially bench press. What a call sign. You got to earn it. Like, it'd be cool if, like, all right, he got bench press because he can bench, like, I don't know, 300 pounds or something crazy.
Sure, but you can't tout that for yourself. Others got to witness it.
Exactly.
Although my favorite part of this entire scene in the hospital where he's meeting up with the good old boys is when he's like, none of you are doctors. How are you actually going to watch Gary and convince the hospital staff that you're actually taking care of him? And then who comes out of the bathroom? You hear a flush. None other than Skip motherfucking Treywick. I forget what he says in a Scottish accent, but it's awesome.
Something crazy. I also like how I don't know if it's this scene or a little bit later where they're talking about like hot females, and Avigliano wants to be set up with Palmer. Like, Does Palmer like men like that? Because I can be like that.
Oh my god! Well, and then there's also Alexandra's photo when they find out.
Oh yeah,
Scott,
they go head over heels for her photo.
Scott has to go team up with her, and I forget who it is, but they're not showing everyone the picture. And Gordo or one of them is like, "Can I see the picture?"
Yeah, and then we meet these two. Did we meet the ops guy and the comms guy in Lions or in Path?
I don't.
Oh yeah, no, they're the ones that come to rescue him in the dune buggy. Yes.
Oh, in Path. Yeah. Was it that? Was it those guys? Okay. It was.
Yeah, he mentions it because the one guy. What are their names again?
I know DeWolf and Carlson.
Yeah, Carlson I think gets shot.
Right.
In the desert. He has to get carried. Yeah, in the desert. Yeah.
That's right. Man, I love this whole team coming together, and it's kind of strange where they have to go next. Because one thing Gary gives them, I was going to say on his deathbed, but not on his deathbed, but before surgery, right? They have a very brief window where they can get some response from him. He can't speak, but he can only write, and he draws a logo. So he writes Helmut, and so Scott's confused, like, Helmut Draeger, your whole backstory with him, you killed him 15 years ago, you know, after he murdered your wife, which maybe we'll get into in a second, but he also draws a logo and the letters MME, and they can't figure it out. But Herman knows that's one of the most well-known, what does he call it? It's a brothel, essentially.
Establishments of the night?
An establishment, yeah. And MME is Madame. So they have to go ask for Madame at this very well-known establishment.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I think even in the beginning of the chapter, Brad writes, first a porn studio, which we didn't mention in the last episode, and now a brothel. Like, yeah. They went to a porn. That's how they get the information on from the camera.
The video
at this guy. His friend has a porn production facility, and that now they're at a brothel. Very nice brothel with a very nice, attractive-looking young lady who's in charge of it, or is the daughter of the lady, the madame who's in charge of it.
Whose
and
mother...
we find out that she's... yes.
The madame actually was working with Gary. And she is somebody on the teams, and she even has her own beer stein and number for the operation. So Gary's got this whole network, especially in East Berlin, the Cold War days. He's got a whole crew he's been running over there. I love how we're getting bits and pieces of who he was and when he was at the height of operations in the field, what he was doing.
Yeah, and we find out that actually this madame was so entwined with the team that she actually fell in love with one of the players, right? And that the daughter who we meet is a product of that. Yeah, and then we get this really intense scene like right after that team up, and then they find out they do the whole burst transmission. They are able to figure it out. Again, Scott's able to figure out the clues. What is it? Patton's speech, the date of Patton's speech minus like the number on the bottom of the mug, and that's how they're able to get into be able to send the transmission to Frank Layton.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, the Patton stuff, like I said last episode, those puzzles just go a little too long for me, and sometimes are just a little far-fetched. They were even trying like, oh, what about the day Patton, liberated this part of Sicily or whatever, and it's getting a little obscure. You know what I would have liked?
But the Wolf even calls it out, though.
He does. But, dude, how much would this have hit? Especially because the whole Gary-Scot relationship, Scott losing his father, Gary not making the memorial, blah, blah, blah. What if the code was Scott's birthday?
Yeah, but it has to be something that the whole team can remember. I know that would hit hard, but it had to be something that the whole team can remember,
Okay.
And it's back. Scott wasn't born yet.
What if it's Michael Harvath's birthday or death day? That would have been
again. Good. He was still alive. This is we're talking the code from years ago. These people have been sleeper agents for a long time. So I get for dramatic effect that would be too coincidental.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, I was thinking to show Gary's the importance. Like, what's a number Gary Lawler would never forget? I get you. Was the Harvath's birthday? Yeah, okay.
So then they're in this brothel. They get that burst transmission off, and then a fire breaks out. And some gunfire, a fire and gunfire both break out.
Right.
And they're on the run. And we get, we've seen Helmut Draeger. He intercepted Lawler previously. He's interrogating him, and now he's an operator. But they mentioned that he's like a 60-year-old dude. He's like Gary's age. So this man is like freaking awesome. Like when you think about it, like this old dude who's able to have on these night vision goggles, take out these guys, give Scott and DeWolf a run for their money. That whole scene in the dungeon, I was thinking about, when I'm reading this entire novel, I'm like, this would be a really good movie.
Yeah.
Like a really good movie.
The brothel scene for sure.
Then they go, once they are able to get away, I guess Draeger escapes them by going through these tunnels that are essentially like peeping holes. I don't know if it's for Madame or other people who just want to peep on other people having sex, whatever. And that's how they're able to get out the building. And then we get this whole backstory about how that's actually how Draeger was able to know and go and kill all of Gary's team, because he knew that this was going play. Like the Russians allowed the Dark Knight to think that they were undetected, but in actuality, they knew about it the entire time.
They were peeping on him from this brothel, so they knew all the agents who'd come in and out, and they'd be able to hear all their secret conversations, and they were tracking Gary's guys the whole time. Spooky stuff.
Very spooky.
Another complication, though, Helmut, in his old age, and both Gary and Scott, when they found out he was alive, couldn't believe it, because there's some really, really deep backstory between Helmut and Gary.
Yeah, I like that. I like the whole story of how Gary left him for dead. And, how Helmut killed his wife.
Right. It was a story in a story. Because Gary and, I think it was Haida? Was Haida or Heidi?
Haida.
Haida or Heidi?
I listened to it, so he said Haida. So
yeah. But somehow Helmut killed her because they were both
with a car accident
working together. Right, it made it look like a car accident. So Gary went after Helmut, and when he got him, he chained him up. He put some explosives in the room. I forget where it was and what the context was.
In a church.
It was in a church. Gary wanted him to suffer, so he beat him, he chained him up, and then he left him to explode, and Gary watched the explosion happen. So he assumed he was dead. Helmut Draeger chewed his own arm off to get free. And Gary even broke his leg. So he basically crawled out with one arm because he chewed his other arm off to get free of the handcuff and just saved himself before the explosion. So it's like wild that this man is alive and still operating like he is at his old age.
What's the old adage? If you don't sue the body, they're not dead.
They're not dead.
Gary messed up in that sense. But yeah, you get some Saw action with the description about how he, like saw the movie where he eats off his own hand just to save his life. And then he even brings it back later on with Scott when he chains him up and does a similar take where he's going to send a video to Lawler that shows Scott next to these nukes chained up just like Gary did all those years ago with him. Yeah, just the backstory we get, it really fleshes him out, and it makes him even that more scary of a bad guy. I don't know, I really enjoyed like these little snippets that we got of tying him into the whole story, into Gary, into the current plot.
I think it not only makes him a better villain, but it makes Gary Lawler a better hero. Just knowing
we find out more about him.
Right.
Yep.
Well, there's one more major action scene before we have the race to the finish, the last action sequence where we really got to stop these nukes. And what's cool that this whole time is the State of the Union countdown. What do you think of that as cool. A little technique that Brad was using here?
Yeah, especially because the first chapter, right, we know where the president will ultimately end up deciding like what to do, and we know that we were getting these snippets, and then it's just this countdown. And it just adds to the propulsion of the story to know we're getting closer and closer to the end, supposed end, right? I really enjoyed it. Kind of like we mentioned with Howdy's writing, how that just leads to the propulsion. Again, I also think, and Vince did this as well. Did you notice that the chapters kept getting shorter and shorter towards the end?
They did, yes. And the action is really rising when we're, I think, 1 to 2 days out from the State of the Union. And then the final action sequence is all happening within 2-hour countdown to the State of the Union. So it's like 24, that clock is ticking.
Right.
And it's putting the pressure on us and the good guys to really, figure things out. Scott's always under the gun. There's always like a time component to his operations. But I think I felt it here more than a lot of other thrillers I've ever read.
So we now leave Germany. We spent a bulk of the time of the book. I feel like a solid third of the book is in Germany, right? Third to
that whole middle section, yeah, for sure.
We make a quick pit stop in Finland, where Scott's able to meet up with Leighton, along with the CIA crew. Again, we get these description of the vehicles that they use to insert themselves in, with the AUVs, like the little propulsion systems they use to go under the water.
Yeah. I picture it like a little rocket, right? With like wings that you just hold on to, and it kind of like zooms you underwater.
And like you click in, like at one point he mentions that like you actually like click your arms into it, so like you can't be thrown away from it. It's kind of very cool. Wild. And then like the description of the tech that they wear, like the suits, and like how the oxygen, how it refilters and actually like replenishes their fuel. It was a lesson.
It was. And what they're trying to do here, some sealed delivery system with all this tech, takes them to the Gagarin. No. What's the boat?
To the Rebecca.
The Rebecca, was that the name of it?
The one that Leighton has with the nuke. Like he met up with Leighton. They tell Leighton his new plan.
Yes.
And then Leighton goes off with Morell and team. But then Scott has to take his boat into Russian territory.
That's right.
And then we get a chase down with a couple of Russian subs. And, Scott almost dies. Remember, like he has to make his way out.
Yeah. And doesn't he pop up? So he takes this like propulsion device to get away after they basically caught him. And he gets away just far enough to take out a grenade launcher. Doesn't he hit him with a grenade launcher while floating in the water?
So he thinks normally this thing has like it's very quiet, but the subs have like really good sonar, so they're able to pick him up.
Yes.
He uses like where he put this bag that he puts all of his stuff that needs to stay water like that can't get in the water, but it like floats. He like sends that up so that way they shoot at that, and then he comes up and takes out some of these people. One of the guys who falls over has a grenade launcher that he then takes, and then he uses that to shoot at a boat. And then he also, like, the Rebecca was rigged to explode, so he took out another sub. But Scott single-handedly takes out like 2 of these Russian fighter boats or subs, whatever they are,
while he's just like floating in the water.
Yeah,
that was
pretty
wild.
Sick. It's pretty badass. Yeah.
I think that's a scene that with the unabridged or the abridged version might have been completely taken out, because I remember reading it and thinking it was cool, but I think that was something that got cut now that I think of it, because I'm a little fuzzy on it. I think it's because I didn't refresh it when I did the abridged, which is interesting because it's one of Scott's like most badass moments.
Yeah, he single-handedly takes out these Russian dudes and blows up 2 Russian ships. And just the description of the tech we get through it is really cool. So, yeah. That's
and him
funny.
as a frogman. It really shows you that.
Right. And I think that's the scene where he talks about... he talks because he's driving the Rebecca. He talks about how his love for the sea and how...
Yes.
When he joined the Marines, he really like felt a part of a team, and how he could never... Like, the sea was his mistress, just like his father.
That's right. That's right.
So then we move from, the Russians think that everything's going according to plan. Leighton, because they know Leighton's coming in, right? They were trying to get him. Then he goes to St. Petersburg, and this is where he had gotten information from, I guess, Morel, that they have this contact in Alexandria, who we've sort of met a couple chapters. We obviously she was there at the very beginning with the meeting of the 4 Russian generals. There's this other minor like Russian mafia guy who gets sent to kidnap her, but she ends up killing him, or actually one of the generals who actually survives that attack, and she tries to rescue. But yeah, so she's on the trail too. So now her and Scott, their paths are coming together and she's trying to do it to clear her father's name, because her father was a double agent feeding information to the Americans. The Americans didn't believe him when he told them about this whole, nuclear plot. Essentially left him out to dry. So she's trying to clear his name, and now Scott needs to find her because she has the information that he needs.
Yeah. And at the same time, and Scott drops a line like, we're on the same team here. We might have different objectives, or we're in it for different reasons, but in a lot of ways we're on the same team, because Alexandra also thinks the nuke plot is absolutely nuts. She might have an axe to grind with the Americans, but her father ultimately wanted to help them during the Cold War to avert mutually assured destruction. And now she's seeing her country, that she is still an intelligence operative for, they're leading down the path of mutually assured destruction. And so she also thinks that's crazy and kind of wants to stop the hardliners on her side as well. So that's where Scott has some wiggle room to convince her to work together. And then they're forced to work together because of, what is that shootout where she saves him? Does she save him, or does he save her? So
he ends up following her, and she goes to meet a contact, one of the doctors or scientists who's working on the whole, system with the missile system, defense system, at this oxygen bar.
Yes,
and that's where again Draeger is there.
I think that's where Scott sees Helmut Draeger and is like, "Oh my God, Gary wasn't senile when he wrote Helmut. He's alive."
Immediately after that, that's where Draeger goes to the United States, I assume. But yeah, and then they get this one word to go look for Albert, and as well as a location, and they have to do it old-fashioned style. This takes us, we're just speeding through, going place to place now, like sort of very Brad Thor style, mainly staying in Russia. Right, we go from St. Petersburg, a couple different locations, then we go to this church where they're able to find. I thought this was pretty cool that the Saint Albert is the patron saint of scientists, but there is no Saint Albert in the Russian Orthodox religion, so that's kind of weird. And then they find plans and different things for this submarine, or this
the scientists left them there.
The scientists, yeah. And then that sends them to the White Sea, and Archangel, the town of Archangel. I can't pronounce the Russian.
Archangel in English, but yeah,
right. They make their way to this town, and they also make contact on the way. They make contact with the general, and they set up they have essentially Scot decides to turn himself over as a Trojan horse.
So Alexandra can bring him in. Yep, and get on the ship and get an appearance.
And we get this pretty cool scene with the helicopter where Morel's team is like hiding in the woods and they're able to take him out. And then they're able to now like dress up as Spetsnaz and really complete this whole Trojan horse thing. What did you think of that ambush scene?
I thought it was kind of cool, especially because they need the Russian pilot to take them on the chopper to give the air signals and not to tip anybody off. So to like communicate on the comms, which takes them right onto the ship, which it turns out is the same ship with running the missile defense system. So they're getting their guys on basically to ground zero, because this missile defense system is the reason we have to play this whole secret agent, undercover, sneak the backpack nukes in, because we can't shoot the nukes. So if we could take down the missile defense system, that jig is up, because now we could threaten them, with airstrikes. So they take the chopper onto the ship and they get an appearance. And at one point, Scot's like, enough's enough. And he pulls a gun on the general. And the general's like, ha ha ha, underestimating me. I have all these men. And Scot goes, no, you don't. They're my men. And then they lift their masks, show themselves. It's Gordo, it's Morel, it's the crew. And the general's still laughing. He's like, oh, no. You've underestimated me, Scot Harvath. These men. And there's like plainclothes people, some working at computer stations.
Dressed up as computer techs, yeah.
Yeah, they look like computer techs, but they're actually his agents and his guards. And so now Scot and his crew are way outnumbered by all these guys. So it was like a little, I turn the tables on you, and then the tables get turned again.
Yeah, I don't know what we kind of talked about Draeger and how good of a villain he is. What did you think as a whole the general was as a villain? This whole scene, rings of, Dr. Evil.
Yes.
At the end of like a James Bond, like, you think you have me, but actually I have you. I thought Scot sort of played his hand too quickly there, like thinking that he had the upper hand.
He did.
And I think he even quips, like Brad writes, man, like, they must be really, really sure of themselves that they don't have more security on this boat.
Oh, right.
When it's like, no, they actually do have a lot of security. You're just being an idiot right now.
You were the ones being naive. Yeah. So I like this cat and mouse game going on in the boat. It's a lot of fun. I do think it might fall apart when they get captured and put in this room. I'm kind of like
that scene was like how they get off the boat is kind of like crazy to me.
Yeah.
In terms of, I don't understand how the two, DeWolf and Carlson had time to like go around and place all these
that felt weird
charges and stuff like that. I was a little confused by that, and how they're able to, send a signal when obviously they knew from the very beginning, right? Because you said that they needed to keep the Russian pilot to give the signals, but
they didn't need him to
what
get
he actually
out.
did, he didn't give signals, and that was the key to let them know.
Yep.
He didn't say anything, and that was like a sign. If I don't say anything, then that means I'm under duress. So they knew from the very beginning that these guys are bad, and so that the fact that they would just let two of their men just run over the boat, I don't know. That was a little confusing to me.
Well, that, but also escaping from the room. So they put them all in the holding cell, and Carlson or one of them still has a backpack with det cord, and so they could blow themselves out, and he starts a fire eventually. I'm like, how do you still have your equipment? How are you putting a holding cell all in the same place? And leading up to this, how did you have enough time to plant all the explosives and for DeWolf to put a logic bomb and basically a bug into their system to take down their whole comm system?
Right.
You did all of that off page in a scene that is like really, we're under the gun, with the countdown is on. So
it was a little hand wavy.
Yeah.
I think maybe just a little bit of exposition to explain what DeWolf was going to do before they got to the ship. Maybe that would lead to a little bit more to the buy-in. But yeah, I would agree with you. Like the fact, I was just thinking, I was like, wait, they had all this time off page to do this stuff? Yeah, and the fact that Alexandra gets sent to the general's office, which has like, that's where the det cord is, and she brings it back to them.
She brings it
after, and the other scientist is the one who rescues her. But I would have liked to see that scene, where she's in that office, or see how she ends up getting those two notebooks, which are key to like figuring out the location of the nukes from that office. It's just like sort of thrown in.
I think here's what's happening. I think balance and pacing is coming to a head.
Sure.
Because
you don't want to go off into those different tangents.
Right. That boat scene and the level of detail, how it's playing out, could literally
It's really cool.
But it could literally be the bulk of a thriller's action. Like, it could be a third of an entire thriller, and that's like the main storyline. This is kind of a side plot to kind of bring us to the ending, because we still have to go back to DC and the whole cemetery scene, which I want to wrap up with. So this is like, we're already 70, 75, 80% through the book, but this really important big takedown and escape and blowing up a ship in the White Sea in northern Russia, that could literally carry a thriller, but it's just kind of this last kind of side adventure of Scott and crew. So I feel like Brad is so aggressive in what he wants to cover and so many stories that he could tell. It almost is trying to mash them in, and things like that get cut or go missing. Otherwise, this book would be 2,000 pages, and I think I would have read it. But I think it's just a balance. It's a consequence of balance and pacing and wanting to maybe do too much, and the story being too real and too big for one thriller.
Yeah, maybe this is where the edit takes some of that stuff out. I'm sure maybe Brad even had those chapters, and it was just we gotta cut something here, and this makes the most sense. And I do think that whatever, maybe if stuff was cut or the direction that was taken, this whole up until when they're on the boat and then getting off of it just felt a little, I don't know, it was just a little off to me. Not to say like it wasn't cool in terms of like the action we got where they take out the Spetsnaz, where they blow up the freaking ship. At one point we're having like a Titanic scene where he saves Alexander off the side of the boat.
Right.
This is where the general dies on that, he's on the helicopter, right? He ends up going down. That's how he dies. So it was just like, it was just crazy.
It's almost like how we felt at the end of Path of the Assassin. The stuff in Italy could have been really cool, but we were so tired. We were so drained from the story. It went so long. I feel like here, this could have been the coolest thing ever if it happened midway through the book or in a shorter book. It was just, was it the right place and time to go into something that complex with an op that big?
Right.
I don't know.
But I will say, once we get back to the United States,
yes,
those chapters didn't felt that way at all.
No.
They felt everything felt important.
Oh yeah,
everything was succinct. Scott's traveling around from, I guess they're at wherever they're doing the investigation. Alexander's helping out because they have the names of all these operatives and one of the ones who got killed by Draeger. And so he begins to do his investigation again. And this leads him to Gary's house.
Yes.
Because Draeger decided to wear Gary's coat,
the tweed jacket,
into the building. Yeah.
And they saw it on a surveillance tape because the guy was an antiques dealer. By the way, on Wisconsin Avenue, Georgetown, there's that antique shop on the corner. Right. I can't help but think it's that one because that's a pretty big one. He says it's on Wisconsin Avenue. Again, pass that every day on my way to work. But the owner of this antique shop, which is a well-known Washington, D.C. establishment, he's been a mole. He was a Russian mole, and he was feeding things, and he had contacts with the Russians. So on that surveillance tape, they see Draeger wearing the jacket, and basically Scott goes, I know where Draeger's been, at Gary's house. But it's a trap.
At Gary's house. So there's that whole, like, Alexander saves his life, and then finally we get to the conclusion. They figure out that it's cemeteries.
Because it's rental car.
The rental car and the LoJack. And why would all these operatives, when they were found, have flowers and jacks? And it makes sense because they're flowers for the cemetery and jacks because they need to jack up these giant, I'm guessing,
marble slabs.
Marble slabs that are encasing in the mausoleums. Yeah. So I guess just what did you think about the final scene, the showdown with Draeger, how Scott's able to save the day and be this one-man American savior?
I thought that was super fun. If I was feeling some of the action and plot was getting long-winded, this looped me right back in. It was crisp. It was propulsive, as we like to say. They get to Congressional Cemetery. They see a mausoleum for a family named Lenin. Scott's like, I'm going in. Alexandra, wait here. He goes in, he hears a grenade rolling towards him. He hears shots fired, and Gary says, or Morrell says they have guys down outside, the other side of the cemetery. All this is happening. Scott hides behind 2 marble slabs in a mausoleum to save himself from the grenade. He sees the nukes at the other end of the mausoleum. They're all in here, and that's how we didn't pick up on them. They hide them behind lead and marble under layers and layers in these cemeteries, and they're rigged to go. And Scott, he needs to figure this out. How does he actually take down Draeger? I'm trying to remember. Or does Alexandra take the final shot?
Alexandra is the one who takes the final shot.
And he's wondering, did Alexandra turn on him? Is she the one?
Right, all the way to the very end, because we don't actually ever see Helmet die.
No.
Scott says, oh, there's Alexandra, and then Brad says there's a shot. And, it's sort of cut page. And then we go 2 days after the State of the Union. And we get sort of this exposition, which is a common thing that Brad's been doing. Not as bad here. I like the little scene at the White House with his old team, as well as with the president.
Yes.
And finding out about what went down, what Draeger was doing.
They found all the other nukes, which were also in cemeteries, in a mausoleum for the family name of Lenin, in both the U.S. and some other, I think, of our allies, our European ally cities.
What did you think of the president's phone call to the Russian president at the end?
I liked it. He's playing hardball. The president is giving it right to him. He's cutting off the Russian president, saying, you tried, you failed, we called your bluff. We beat you. There's nothing you can do about it. And the president even says, I'm bombing Moscow, essentially. He goes, I'll leave your villa alone. I'll give you, 12 hours or something to evacuate.
It'll be Russian, or it'll be military and establishments only, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hitting military and government sites throughout Russia, and don't you dare retaliate, because we caught you planting nukes all across our cities. You can't get out of this. I think Rutledge here is playing hardball, and he needs to. And he's on the offensive, and he's not going to take any bull and not going to get pushed around. He's going to call it like it is. So I think he came on very strong here. It was also Scott's biggest honor of his life.
To get the salute?
When he gets a salute from General Vinnick, who's the head of...
the Joint Chiefs.
Yeah, he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And then the Defense Secretary Hillman and the president, all 3 stand up in unison and salute Scott. And he says it was the biggest honor of his life.
Yeah, that was pretty cool there. And also, I like the one little line that his Secret Service friend says to him about, how they didn't know why we were celebrating you,
right? But
they truly meant it.
They did.
And that's something you should be proud of.
And I think they fed the media some BS story so that the world didn't really know how close we came to nuclear disaster. And they made Scott the hero. And Skip Trawick starts for He's a Jolly Good Fellow in his Scottish accent.
Yes.
Dude, I haven't had a lot of quotes, but the writing, this entire book has been fantastic. But I think this was a really, really impactful way to show how much this means to Scott. How much his hard work is being paid off and being recognized. Brad writes, quote, Harvath didn't require accolades or parties in his honor. That wasn't why he did what he did. Scot Harvath did what he did out of honor, an honor instilled in him by his father, but an honor that he had come to know, understand, and deserve only as an adult. While he couldn't go back and fix the way things had been between them before his father had died, he could appreciate the man for who he was. Scott also came to peace with the fact that he was very proud of himself and what he had been able to accomplish, and in life, that was all that mattered. Scott's growing.
Powerful.
Scott is growing.
Yeah, no, you could feel it.
He's reflective, right? He's not just this jokester, He's a very serious guy, and he's reflecting on his father, his relationship with his father. Meg even picks up on Gary can't replace your father. You got to kind of get over this and work it out. This is a very sober, mature, grown-up Scott that I don't think we saw yet.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, so we get this epilogue where they finally get the service for his dad. Meg and him part ways, and Lawler sends him back into action. Do we immediately pick up with the shooting in Montparnasse in Paris?
I wonder. Yeah, he says you're needed. Pack your bags. There's a shooting in Paris. I don't know why Scott needs to be involved in the shooting. I can't recall what happens in... What's the next book?
Is it Blowback, or is that the next one?
I think it's Blowback. But we're going to pick up right here. This is a little tiny cliffhanger to get us ready for the next one.
Are you sad to see Meg go? I guess you kind of talked about it last episode, but
is she really gone though? I saw it as she was letting him go in the sense of understanding he needs to run out for the op. She obviously wants him to herself. They were going to have some time together. But I read that as she's letting him go in the sense of, I'm going to give you the space to operate.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're right.
So we'll see in Blowback if they're still a piece. If the shooting in Paris is something bigger than we thought. I think I remember liking Blowback, but I don't recall too much about it. You'll find out next month on the Scot Harvath podcast.
But before we get into that, we got to do the scorecard, man.
Yes, we do.
All right. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm vibing on this book. I went high both for plot and action. I gave it double tens.
I couldn't believe that. That's high praise.
Double tens. I liked it. I liked the plot. I thought the action, there was plentiful and it was great. Maybe I could go down to a 9 just because of that. The one scene we were just talking about with the Gagarin. Mm-hmm. But no, I like the Cold War stuff, the spy stuff, everything was really good. Okay. And I like, Scott as the actor. It was well thought out. So yeah, I gave it double tens.
Okay. All right. I gave it a 9 on action. The action was awesome, nonstop throughout, but an 8 on the plot, really only because the dragging towards the very end and wait, how did we get here? Why are we on this ship? And how did you escape from this little room? And yeah, so we talked about it, but 8 out of 10, still love the plot, was bought in. And especially I loved the Gary Lawler Dark Knight operations, the spy versus spy of running these sleeper agents. I thought that was really cool. And because of that, It kept me bought in. 4 out of 5 on buy-in. No,
we're pretty high on buy-in. Like I believe pretty much everything in this, so give it a 4 as well.
Now, I was prepared to go a little lower on the bad guys. I was going to go with 3 out of 5, but talking about Helmut Draeger and his backstory with Gary and Sevastopol, still can't say his
name. We're calling him Sevastopol, yeah.
We only spoke for 2 hours about him, but I still can't get it right. Sevastopol, which is the name of the city. I thought he was a very good
Stavropol.
Big bad. Stavropol, yeah. A good big bad. Helmut Draeger was a good operative bad, villain bad, doing the action bad, and Stavropol being the maniacal, philosophical driver behind it all. I thought it was pretty good, so I went 3.5.
Okay. I went a 4. I think like we could have got a little bit more of the general. Like he was heavy in the beginning and then very heavy in the final scene, but that final scene was like a little bit messed up. I can't even like really remember how he died. Like that's how much I was confused during that whole sequence. But I think overall, like you said with the helmet really brings the bad guys back up. So I gave it a 4.
Yep.
Now, good guys.
Oh yeah.
This is a 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5.
Just we get Herman the German, we get Rick Morrell and team. We get Alexandra, we get Gary Lawler. We every single person that Scott, that is teaming up with, they're good. They're well thought out. And there's not this whole like dynamic between with Scott not liking many of them like we got in the previous 2 books. So I don't know. The good guys were really good in this one.
100%, 5 out of 5. I loved Herman the German and his boys. Seb, I think Sebastian was one of them. That's awesome. Setting though, I know we said we love it, and it's Brad Thor's shtick. I was glad we didn't go to all that many places. So while I would say Berlin was a 5 out of 5, East Berlin, when we were there, I was loving the setting and the descriptions. I got a little lost in Russia. Were we in St. Petersburg? Were we in Archangel? Were we on the Kola Peninsula next to the White Sea? I got a little lost there, a little fuzzy. And then when we were in the U.S., like, okay, I know we were in Coronado Beach, but I didn't hear all the details of where are the different military installations and the beaches and the SEAL training. And yeah, so I went 4 out of 5 on setting. It would have been a 5 out of 5 just for Berlin, though.
Right. I gave it a 4 as well, just for the same reasons you said. Again, the descriptions of the settings were great, and I, like you said, I was happy we didn't go super globetrotting. We just did mild globetrotting in this novel, but
Yep. Time for the cover. Judge, a cover by the book. What do you think about these, Chris?
This is probably like my least favorite part of the book, if I had to say. Like, I really like cover D,
yes,
and cover E, which are like the newer covers. Some of the older covers, I don't know, they're just not doing it for me. I like cover C, which is on Brad's page of him holding up a picture of that. I don't like the lettering. I don't mind like the flag with the United States, but I don't like the lettering of State of the Union.
I agree.
We got like Jared Leto here on G.
I never like those German ones. Ein Scott Harvath thriller. I don't like when they have a picture of the person. And to be honest with you, we're going to cover Jack Carr. Every one of his books has this outline or even sometimes the face of a person. And I'm just like, I don't need that. And I don't think that's James Reese right there. It doesn't fit for me. So anytime there's a person with the gun, it's too easy to get wrong. And it's usually wrong. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, but the two I like have the hammer and sickle.
Correct.
Which I think, Russia plays a big role in this. And as well as D has the hammer and sickle stamped right over
the Capitol.
The Capitol building. I really like that.
I agree.
The original covers are interesting because they have, what is that, Mike, on A and B?
I don't know. A double-headed eagle or bird? Well, B is the trident, the seal.
Right.
The seal
thing.
I don't know what A is.
And now I see the nuclear radiation, but I don't know. I guess it doesn't really tell me much. Whereas like the other ones tell me that Russia's going to be a player in it. I like that aspect to it.
Right. Ooh, the double-headed eagle is a concept of empire.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Which one's your favorite, Mike?
I think you're right. The originals are not doing it for me. A, B, or C. Not so much to do with this story. I'm not really getting the vibes of what's going on, like the seal trident and the ribbon. Okay, maybe the book's very reflective about Scott and his background and who he is, but A, I think has nothing to do with anything. It's actually probably one of the worst originals between Brad Thor, Vince Flynn. It might be one of the worst OGs, original covers. Also the gray. Sometimes a nice steel, a modern gray will do it for me. But this is like a very dull, boring gray with flames. And the flames don't really pop when they're on a dull, boring gray. So it's not even like a gunmetal gray. I don't know what it is. D, though, is killing it. You are right. Big winner in D. The sickle on the Capitol building, the yellow. For some reason, the yellow and the light red scream to me pop. Soviet era. And the fact that it's on the Capitol building, it's supposed to look like Soviet iconography, but on the Capitol, and it's called State of the Union. Oh, hell yeah, I'm buying that. So, yeah, D and E are the best, but definitely D takes the cake.
Yeah, so because of that, I gave it a 3.5.
Yeah, I convinced myself I'm going down to a 3. I'm going down to a 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
1 out of 8 or 1 out of 7 covers. Like, you got to have some more good ones thrown in there. It's only one good one.
The plot of the book is raising the rest of the covers for me.
Gotcha. Okay. How about a free space? Let's end with some positivity. What are you giving a perfect 5 out of 5 in this book?
I could do a lot of things, but what I really enjoyed was the descriptions we get of some of the tech in this book. And I feel like it really shines and shows, Brad's research and how he wants to adapt that Clancy-esqueness that we talk about into his novel. I thought it was really well integrated, didn't bog us down too much, and I learned a lot. So yeah, that would be my free space. I could have picked that, or I could have picked the... we already kind of did them with the good guys, but I just like the integration of the new characters, even though we've seen them before. I feel like they were a little bit more fleshed out here, so I like that as well.
That's my 5 out of 5. Yep, the team
I stole it.
Gordo, he's pretty funny, but he's a great operator. Morrell coming around to him, even with his quirks. Herman the German assembling that team, giving Scott whatever he needed. Loved all this. Fleshing out Gary's backstory.
Herman the German is the winner of the book for sure.
Herman wins, absolutely, and his boys. So 5 out of 5 for those guys. Bringing me to a total 41.5. But Chris, you passed the 45 threshold. 45 and a half.
45 and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a solid book for me. I really liked it.
That is a good book. I agree with you.
So right now it's probably this, then Lions, then Path. I don't know, that's hard. We have to go back and redo our Lions scorecard. But yeah, no, I was vibing with this book. So
yeah, Lions was out of 30 points before we really finalized the scorecard. So we'll bring you guys down the road a bonus episode. We'll readjust our scorecard, and plenty more to come on this podcast, especially as we get ready in just a few short weeks for Rising Tiger. And Chris, we have confirmed a date to get Brad Thor on this podcast. We can't wait. I remember the first time we got to talk to Kyle Mills. It was so exciting. Those same feelings are coming back that we are going to sit down with Brad Thor.
I know when you emailed me, you were like, "Are you good for this date with Brad?" I was like, "Wait, it's happening! It's actually happening!" I knew like David had said we could easily get him as long as we had time to, but now it's official. It's super exciting. I get a little giddy to talk to these authors.
It's on the calendar.
It'll be fun.
We got a date.
Yeah,
and a little teaser for you guys, just like on the Mitch Rapp pod, when I almost said Oath of Loyalty, when Enemy at the Gates came out, we had Kyle come on the show to spoil it with us. So we can hear what was going on in his mind when he made the decisions he made, why he wrote what he wrote happening there. So we really hope to have an episode with Brad where he gets to spoil and talk about the choices, decisions, plot points, characters that he wrote in Rising Tiger. So stay tuned, subscribe, and also don't forget, subscribe on the Thriller podcast. We're going to be covering a lot of Jack Carr in the months of June and July.
Right. So next month we'll be bringing you Rising Tiger, taking a little bit of a break from this current thing, as Mike just said, as well as bringing you our interview with Brad. We need to thank our patrons, our special operator Sherry F., our special agents Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always,
Alex! Oh, that fucking Alex!
and just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Brad Thor, Scott Harvath, or Simon & Schuster. The music soundtrack is Honor Bound by Brian Teo.